left. Again, I tell you, water is all I'll drink. I don't want these gloopy drinks with 600 calories. To me, it's just like, I can't even think of doing it anymore. Perception change. Just like we had the perception to think that those crazy drinks and that crazy food when you go to a restaurant, it's just, there's nothing I can order at the restaurant. Matter of fact, I had to go the other day and I went to a restaurant and it's just ridiculous. The oil, the salt, and the sugar. I mean, even I had some Brussels sprouts, they said, and it was just all full of oil. And a lot of times you ask them, they say, well, go to a restaurant. But you're in a situation there, and you do ask them, they always got to put something on it. Because in their mind, they want to get you to come back. You look at the food, even when people eat different types of food, whether it's high protein, the protein has on it what? Tremendous amount. You can't even see it. It's all full. You're not tasting that. You're tasting the sugar. So something that could be 200 calories all of a sudden turns out to be 600. Even I held up the potato. Well, what is it when you make this into French fries, right? It's 3 times the calories. But it's more wholesome. What do you want, all that oil in your mouth? It wasn't meant, that's processed, all that oil. But after a while, you'll love this. In other words, they have certain, actually, hey, never mind a sweet potato. But even a sweet potato, we used to put, brown sugar on it. Crazy, that was sour cream. I don't know, all kinds of crazy stuff and oil on that. And there's a million other things. Sweet potato. Today, like I'm in ecstasy. If I eat a sweet potato, it's just most amazing. And even plain potatoes. I mean, I'm getting down to, people say talk about the food, talk about the diet. I'm not talking about it, though I know all of that stuff about it. I'm not talking about any sophistication like people come on and says, well, this is the amount of carbohydrates. This is what it does metabolically in the body. That's getting back into the scientists trying to figure things out, analyzing it. We need a spiritual solution because the other way doesn't work. All the doctors and scientists, and I read that in page 10, it says here, let me read it quickly again so everybody can hear this. It's pretty amazing. What does it say? And this is the OVEREATERS Anonymous 12 and 12, and it says here, then horrified by what we're doing to ourselves, this is on page 10, with food, we became obsessed with diets. We spent lots of money on weight loss schemes. We bought all sorts of appetite suppressants. We joined diet clubs and fitness centers. We had ourselves hypnotized and analyzed. We had major surgery on our digestive systems. We had our air stapled, our jaws wide shut. Some of us went from doctor to doctor looking for a cure. The doctors gave us diets, but we had no better success than those with who the other diets have been on. A lot of people, I have to say, in the 12-step program where we have the 12 steps here, for some reason, maybe people think the decoration, you go to meetings in the front of the room, they'll have the 12 steps right up there. And then you hear people talk about the diet, about the being in the problem. There's only one solution. It's a spiritual solution. And throughout, right after in the doctor's opinion, he talks about synthetic knowledge. He goes right into it. And he says on the next page, this is Roman numeral 28. It says in the middle of the page, he must be grounded in the power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Right? My best thinking got me here. And it goes on to say, on the next page, on page Roman numeral 29, in the bottom of the first part of the paragraph at the top, unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's little hope of his recovery. So what's your entire psychic change and your change of thinking and your perception? So it definitely isn't dwelling on the one thing you did wrong. We do that. Not only yesterday, we were talking about somebody was discussing what they did with food yesterday. Did you ever go back 10 or 20 years in your life or more and think of one incident that happened? Because we're in the human experience, the ego wants to do that. The ego wants to analyze and resolve it. But step 3 says we have a faith and a belief in a higher consciousness, but that's all the source and powers from within. It's something inside of us already. And it talks about this in the big book, and we agnostics in every man, woman, and child. So if you want that complete change, you want your perception to change, not only with the food is about life, and life is about everything else in life. If you want that complete psychic change in thinking, don't dwell on the past. The past is depression. We're in and the present is eternal bliss and consciousness, and it's just joy. Because whenever we're upset, what is it about? The past or regretting the future, I always say, or planning the past. Think of those things. When we're in the eternal present, if everything is now in the present, that's all it is. But and I say this also, we hear people talk about being in the now, the power of the now. And I go crazy trying to say, well, I'm going to be in the present, or washing the dishes is the present, which is actually meditation. Eastern. We have Eastern Western philosophy, but the main thing we have here is faith. belief in a higher consciousness. Really, again, as we said here, faith is, on page 54, and we agnostics, it says for people who don't want to have faith, it says in the big book, if you go to page 54, it says, we had faith all the time. Near the top, the first paragraph actually, had we not variously worshipped people's sentimental things in ourselves? How about food or addictive things? And then a better motive, we worshipped the sea or the flower. Things of the God-created consciousness, the nature. How can you be out of nature? When you're addiction to food, I was driving my car, eating the pizza, whatever it was. I couldn't, it was just, you're very finite, you're isolated, you're making it your higher power. We have a choice. The corporations, you want to believe what they have to say? They're like the crack and cocaine dealers on the corner. That's what we believe. We go around believing that nonsense and what craziness that all involves. We have a better way. We have a solution here. You're either the problem or the solution. We have actually on page 417, the chapter is called Acceptance is the Answer to All Our Problems. So either we're in the problem or solution. And it talks about the last, an acceptance prayer. Acceptance is the answer on page 417 to all my problems today. I love the last, in this paragraph, the last sentence. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world, at what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. Do you realize our whole lives is about perception? Our whole addiction to food is perception. But when we go on diets, we're strengthening it. What we resist the most is strengthening it. I was on for a year, gray sheet diet. It was very restrictive. You know something? I lost the weight. I was miserable every day. And then finally that day came a year later where it didn't become, the diets work until they don't work, because it didn't become that important. I didn't have the change of thinking designed for living. Now I just want healthy foods. I can eat a lot, but it doesn't have, that's why people are 30, 40, 50, 60 more pounds heavier than they were years ago, because of the corporations. When you have that perception change, you eat healthy. And then we heard somebody say, they went backwards and they had to say, you can have a dessert or something like that. That could happen. Look, people say to me, you said you had a spiritual awakening. How's your life? We just can't be happy all day long, all the time. No, but when I'm unhappy, I get anxious or upset, or I have the addiction to food, I have a solution now, an answer. And it gets more and more easy. It's working that spiritual muscle. That's what we work here. If you go to the gym and you work out with weights, your muscles become bigger, right? We can work out our spiritual muscle. But we don't go to the gym one day and say, I lifted a certain amount of weight, but today I'm lifting less, and then don't go anymore. But that's the way we are with our addictions and in life in general. I got all depressed or upset today, not realizing that by working these spiritual principles, maybe the whole week you were much, much less and you applied it. So it's like we don't go back to square one. That's why I don't like when people say they have a little bit extra food and they bring you back to day one. We're in eternal present, right? It does say one day at a time. That's all we have, right? One day at a time. But if we go back to square one, where's that going? If we limit and our diet and don't have the perception change, if you have your stomach surgery or whatever it is, you take these diet pills or whatever you do, you restrict. Not only that, I was going back to it, I was so unhappy for the whole year. I might as well have eaten because it was going to eventually fail. But now I'm joyous and happy in my diet. And you know what? Some people who do manage, like they say 95% of diets fail, but the 5% who do it through a strict diet regime and trying to figure it out that way are miserable. So what good is it if you're miserable every day? I was so miserable. I didn't have the perception change, and diets tell us don't have the perception change. It's saying those billion-dollar corporations, what do? They're sending us smaller morsels of food. That's what they're doing with the same poison and same high calorie content, the salt, oil, and sugar in it. So where is that going? It's also poisonous. And also, I didn't even begin to mention the other things, because I want to hear everybody else share about. I have lists here of all the diseases created by it, by this momentary pleasure, and all the, all the ingredients. Again, look in the supermarket. It all has like 50 ingredients. And it's a simple program. And it's, it's just the faith. I'm not just talking about the food addiction or alcohol addiction. I'm just saying life. We can use the same energy to be happy. That's the way we were meant to be. And that light switch comes on, and we heard talk about just that change in thinking and perception change. Because our perception was towards negativity and the self and the ego. But with our addiction to food, it's really, really possible. But we tend to, the ego wants to bring us back when we have one little slip, and that's how the meetings start over. Somebody's coming on, said they were at a birthday party, and then they had ate some cake, but they did resist the rest of it or put it away. But Yet we tend to go back to that. Be glorious in your binges or whatever you do that's negative, but we're not responsible for our first thought, but we are for our second. Remember, we start the day over. I love that expression. Every day is a new day. We can reset ourselves. Every moment. It doesn't matter what we did 2 minutes ago, but we want to dwell on 10, 20, 30, 40 more years ago. People, resentments and anger, and we could be through the steps and this spiritual awakening. It's just so true. But today, the modern scientists, I don't know, you go to certain types of therapy, whatever. I never found it there. I never found the self-help books, but in these 12 steps, I found the solution. So even if during the day people say, Bob, you're not happy all the time, are you? I say, no. Sometimes something will come to mind, but I have a solution now. I realized where the problem was me and my crazy thinking. So we were created in God's image to be happy, joyous. That all the answer to all our problems is in here. When we're centered, and it says in the promises, we'll intuitively know the answer to all our problems.